Hi everyone and welcome to another RC Plane Guy video and part 2 in the series of my P-47 Topflite Giant Scale build. In this episode we're going to be looking more on the building of the fuselage itself, so following on from part 1 of the elevator and stab and rudder and fin, we're now moving on to the actual fuselage itself. So as you can see, the formers and everything's going there in the centre, building it up bit by bit. You obviously have to make sure everything's all fully secure to the billboard and no movement. There's the balsa stringers going in, ready for sheeting. Again, some of my homemade little weight bags coming in handy there, as well as several clips, and you can never have enough clips. Now starting to line up the actual stab in place there, so we're making sure that all the angles and everything is 100% spot on before we glue it in place onto the fuzz. So there's marks on the plan there that give you a guide to make sure it's 100% level. And then starting the sheeting. So this was a bit of an intricate part to especially shape the sheeting around where the fin and the stab would sit. So it's just getting that right. Spending that little bit extra time is always going to be worth it. Using string, it was kind of a case of checking that everything was all lined up, and decided before gluing it in place that it would actually glass and sheet the fin and the stab in place, so that it makes when it comes to glassing the rest of the fuselage a little bit easier with that already all glassed and sorted. The engine all bought and ready, so we're going with a Noah 62 for the build. And now getting underway with the glassing process. So using fighter aces from Phil Clark, we used their parts for the glassing, and then the undercarriage parts as well. It was a fiberglass cowl and robot retracts. Just making sure that everything's all fully sanded, filled. You don't want any gaps or anything before you start using the glassing. I actually decided to put in a little bit extra of sheeting on the back end there, just to kind of help cover the hinge gaps, which I'm quite happy with. This wasn't something standard as the kit, so it was a little edit I made on top of the kit. And just checking the movements and adjusting, sanding away and readjusting, making sure any movements are as required. And then onto the glassing. So it's a case of just spreading the sheet out and then really just mixing the resin and mix and getting that all spread out from the center outwards, working at it bit by bit. So you do one layer at a time to wet the glass and spread it around. This was my first attempt at doing it, and I was quite happy with how it came out. It could have been better, could have been worse. So it's first an attempt. And then the same with the fuzz, the fin, sorry, and the rudder. Getting everything all set up there, doing both sides, so one side at a time, putting one layer on, and then once that's dried, it's kind of a case of just sanding off the edges to get rid of any loose sheeting around the edges, and then spinning it over and doing the other side as well. I always like to just take a gap now and again to clear the workshop and just make some space. And then there we go again, so that looks like the second layer going on, and some other first layers going on the opposite sides there. Once the first layer's on, and really just kind of a case of wetting the glass sheet and sticking it to the material, you then apply a thin second layer to just spread out the glass and kind of cover it over. So that's the completed parts, and then it's kind of a case of just lining things up and getting it all glued in place. Again, just checking and double checking again before you glue it in place there. And the bottom half of the fuzz just lining everything up. And there we are, gluing it in place, making sure it's all weighted down and in the right position. Whilst that was being prepared, I started underway on the cockpit, so using my 3D printer, an Ender 3 Pro V2. So I found some files from a friend who helped me print the pilot. And the head and arms and several other bits that go into the pilot. The print could have come out better, but it could have come out worse. So I was happy with it for a first big attempt at printing a large model. This was my little attempt at playing about with making a bit of an access hatch. So I've decided to make a little hatch in the side there, which I'll use for the switch and the air pressure gauge and air fill. So I made a little recess there, hatch in the side of the fuzz, and then just cut out ready to put a door over the top of it. Now working on more of the Razorback section. So this is one of the main differences obviously between the Razorback and the bubble top version. Some more 3D printed parts for the receiver mount and battery. This is a little test that I was playing about with to make sure that my idea worked, and it was basically to slide in the batteries in place and then be able to just screw in a little keeper on top there just to hold it in place. Sheeting the Razorback section, which was quite difficult. Obviously it's quite a sharp bend, and shaping the sheeting around that took a bit of work, but we got there in the end. And again, working on more cockpit pieces, so there's the cockpit floor and the seat. The fuzz starting to take shape now. More cockpit pieces on the 3D printer. And a fillet going in there on the stab to join the fuzz. And there's the pilot with the cockpit pieces all 3D printed and ready to go. The bottom of the fuzz then turned over, ready to start the next stage, building the bottom half. Stay tuned for part 3. And that brings us to the end of this video. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel to keep up to date on all the latest videos. And if YouTube isn't just enough, follow the link tree in my profile to find and follow all my other social media platforms. Thanks, and bye for now.